In this video, I'm going to be ranking the coasters of SeaWorld Orlando. This is my home park, and I've been to it many times, so I have lots of experience with coasters in this park. So, in this video, I'm going to give you my insight into the coasters and see how they fall on this very good lineup. In number 7 is Super Grover's Boxcar Derby. This Zero Kiddie coaster is a great coaster to introduce kids to. It doesn't pull many forces, but it's a fun ride, and it seems like a great coaster if you're just getting into coasters. This is in the Sesame Street area of the park, and it looks very nice and fits in with the other attractions. Next is Journey to Atlantis. This is a really fun mock water coaster. At the beginning, you have some nice theming with the coral reef and Atlantis City inside the dark ride. Then you rise up and pick up the pace with a large drop. The splash doesn't get you very wet, and it's a fun drop. But the part that mainly gets you wet is actually the smaller drop after. It's just has a twist at the end, which means the water will go right into your boat and all over your feet. Then you go into the coaster segment. You start with a lift hill and then go into the dark with a fun drop and some twists and turns for a coaster before a splashdown. Overall, this ride is very fun. It gives the park a good family coaster and integrates some theming where this park usually doesn't have that in most of their rides. The water aspect gives you a good water ride along with Infinity Falls in the park, and the soundtrack is really good. It also looks very nice and gives that area of the park a really good atmosphere. The next coaster is Kraken. This 149-foot B&M floorless coaster was the park's original large coaster. It has many inversions and packs in the positive G's. It can be a bit rough, and it definitely has a rattle. You start off with a dip out of the station. This doesn't really pull any forces. Then you have the lift hill. At the lift hill, you get a really nice view of Mako. Then you have a pre-drop into a straight drop, which is unusual for a floorless coaster. This drop might give you a tiny pop of airtime, but it doesn't really give you that much force. Then you go into a vertical loop. This loop has a lot of positive G's. You don't really have hang time, and it's mainly focused on the positive G's, and it's a good element. Then you go into a dive loop. There's a good snap at the top. You get a lot of positive G's. You can also get a good view of Mako when going through this element. Then is my favorite element, the zero G roll. It's just so snappy, and it gives some floater airtime while you're just being whipped around this roll. Then there's the Cobra roll. This element has two very good snaps at the top with positive G-force on the ascent into the first snap and the descent from the second snap. After a bit of a break, you go into the mid-course brake run. This usually slows the train a little bit, but not really that much. Then you go into a vertical loop in the trench. There are these braces across the trench which give really good head choppers in the loop. The loop is full of positive G's and is about the same as the first one. Then you rise into this little hill. This hill doesn't really give air time. Then the finale. You go down into a tunnel where you get not that strong positive G's. Then you go into a super whippy corkscrew. I usually put my head back because my head is small enough to fit back so it won't hit the restraint, because this corkscrew is very intense and can have some head banging. Then you rise into the final brake run. Overall, This ride is full of positive G's and gives a good looper for the park. It can be rough, but if you ride in the front row, it's smooth. The next coaster is Icebreaker. This was supposed to be a family coaster, but it ended up more thrilling than the park was expecting. It has ejector airtime and a good swing launch. The airtime hills inside of the swing launch give ejector airtime, and the spike gives a really good floating sensation. The top hat gives good airtime coming down it, and most of the elements in the second half after the swing launch give good ejector airtime. The problem with this coaster is that families would be too scared to ride it. It has the best ejector airtime in the park, and I think it's a bit too intense for families, so they actually had to raise the height requirement. But luckily, the park removed the comfort collars earlier this year, and now the height requirement is back at 48 inches. The comfort collars really hurt the experience because your neck went against them and it was uncomfortable. But now with the lap bar, the ride experience has greatly improved, and this was what actually made me go Icebreaker over Kraken. It has a good variety of forces and is a great multi-launch coaster for the park. Manta is the park's Bolliger and Mabillard flying coaster. This coaster looks very scenic in the park. It is intense with the pretzel loop. The pretzel loop has some great positive G-forces while you go on your back through the pretzel loop. The rest of the elements blend together, but you feel like you're soaring throughout the park, and you can see everything in the park from your flying perspective. It's just a really fun ride. The main issue, I think, and why I don't ride this coaster as much as most of the other coasters in the park, is the operations. This coaster has some of the worst operations I've seen. It has a dual station, but I've never seen them utilizing it. And usually the dispatches take more than 4 minutes. That means that this ride can have a really long line that moves very slowly throughout the day. But once you get on the ride, it's just a great ride. There's a famous turn with splash effects, and all the inversions except the pretzel loop are really fun to take, and you just feel so happy when you're just flying over the park and seeing everything. This is a good fit for the park because it gives the park an intense but still graceful coaster that can give you a great view of the park and has a unique seating position. In second place in the park is Pipeline the Surf Coaster. This is a unique model from B&M and is very different from any coaster I've experienced. It may look like a normal stand-up coaster, but the thing that changes this ride is the airtime. The airtime feels very unique from any other coaster. It feels like the seat is actually pushing you up, and your feet will come off the ground at multiple points throughout this ride. It's just so different from any other airtime I've ever felt. It feels more like floater throughout the ride, but since the seat is pushing you, it just feels so crazy being flung up into the air. The inversion is a corkscrew, and it gives you a tiny bit of hang time and is not that whippy. But I think the best element is the airtime hill after the overbanked turn. You just get so much airtime, and it's just so fun to be flying out of your seat. The launch is not that intense, but the airtime hill during the launch makes it so fun. When I first experienced this ride, I was so confused. I don't think anyone expected it to be this good, and I really hope B&M makes more surf coasters. The problem is that the ride doesn't have enough airtime. There are only a few airtime moments, and it mostly focuses on turns, but the airtime is the real highlight of this ride. In the future, B&M should make surf coasters with more airtime-focused layout, but for a prototype, this is really good. It doesn't really have many positive Gs, but I've been on stand-up coasters with lots of positive Gs, and it's not fun to be standing up when you're experiencing positive Gs. Overall, I think this is a great coaster for the park and is a unique coaster in Florida because there are no other stand-up coasters. It doesn't really fill a gap in the lineup, but it's just a great coaster. The number one, you all knew what it would be. It's Mako. This B&M Hyper is one of the best of the model. It just has such good floater airtime. It just is such an amazing ride, packed with airtime. It has one of the best restraints, the B&M clamshell, and I think the best moment on any ride in the park, the 5-second floater hill. This hill will actually give you more than 5 seconds of floater airtime, where you're just out of your seat, flying over this massive camelback, and it's just so amazing to ride. I always count the seconds of airtime when I'm on this part. The rest of the ride is filled with airtime hills and is just such a fun ride. It's an L-shaped layout, and all the runs are just filled with airtime hills. The first drop has amazing airtime, and the rest of the hills are great. The turnaround doesn't have much force, but the rest of the ride is great. The problem with this ride is the second half. I think that this half is sort of weak compared to the rest of the ride. The airtime hill after the mid-course brake run doesn't actually give airtime, and the turns are just there to look cool over the pathway, and nothing there really gives much force. It is fun to fly over the lake, but it isn't really intense or anything. The problem is that the mid-course brake run slows you down too much. In the first test runs of Mako, the mid-course brake run didn't slow you down, so it flew through the second half, and that's what we thought it would be. But it ended up being that the mid-course brake run would be a lot more powerful, and it would trim the ride hard. The trim brake in the first half of the ride doesn't bother me much, but the mid-course does. But overall, this ride is great, and it has received so much praise from coaster enthusiasts and the general public. This ride usually doesn't have a wait because it's in the back of the park, but I think it should have a wait because of how amazing it is. But the thing is, you can just marathon this. This is my most ridden coaster, and I actually rode it 48 times in one day once. And it's just such a re-rideable coaster. It's so smooth and is one of the best hyper coasters in the world. So that's my ranking of the coasters of SeaWorld Orlando. If you liked this video, make sure to like and subscribe. I'm trying out a new style of content from No Limits 2 coasters, and comment if you like it more or less than coasters in No Limits. I'll see if I want to make more videos like this or continue making No Limits coasters. Remember to like and subscribe because this video took a lot of effort and thanks for watching.